Here we go.
Let's go.
Again.
Yes, sir.
What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Kickback, live from the MMA Underground. We are your hosts from the Neon Belly Podcast, Nate,
John,
Brandon.
And tonight, boys, we are going to talk all things UFC 289 and a little bit more, let's be honest. Giving our final picks and predictions. Everybody's weighed in. We're set, locked in. And obviously, we want you guys to chime in down in the live chat as well. John's going to be trying to monitor that the best of his ability.
Man. It's a little bit of a delay, but we're going to get to everybody.
That's right. And with that, boys, how are we doing? Friday night, one night before the big fight, as I mentioned, one more sleep, as the great John Anik would say. How are we feeling?
Feeling pretty good.
Yeah.
It's a nice sunset outside. Seems like a good calm Friday night.
Good weather right here in the Midwest. Can't complain. John's usually our weather guy. I like Brandon's coming out hot with the weather.
Well, it's been a rough week for John, so.
That's fair. Yeah, John pulled up to my house last night for jiu-jitsu, and I walk out the door, and I just hear an abundance of air blowing from my front door.
Yeah.
And John standing outside of his car with his hands on his head. His tire's gone. Yeah. It was just gone.
Yep.
I love it.
And my air went out last week, so that's why another reason why I'm not really talking about. Luckily, it's been cooler. So
yeah, fair enough. You definitely had a rough one. That is fair enough. Also want to let you guys know off top, we are watching ONE FC live as well. If you have Amazon Prime, you can watch this card for free. Man, what a week it's been for combat sports. You know, you had Tough on Tuesday, The Ultimate Fighter. Did you guys watch?
Yep.
Funny enough, I love how, like, last week on our podcast, which, as we mentioned before, we do a weekly mixed martial arts podcast, the Neon Belly Podcast, as you can see right here. You can listen, check it out on all streaming platforms. But on our show this week, John said, we were talking about, the first episode, and John, you mentioned that Connor could, like, convince you to totally fight a stranger.
Yeah, 100%.
And then when he showed up to the house for the haircut, and all the guys were like, man, I had to chill out, man. He was getting me, like, hyped up.
He just has that energy, man.
Then you got the PFL last night, and then obviously the ONE FC tonight, UFC 289 tomorrow. I mean, take your pick, right? And speaking of PFL, did you guys see the Brendan Loughnane knocked out? He got knocked out by Jesus Pinedo last night. Killer. I don't know if you guys saw it.
I didn't get a chance to see it yet. I was going to watch it before we talk about it on our episode, obviously.
So for some context, Loughnane, last year's champion, I think he was like a minus 500 favorite going into this. And not only does Pinedo finish him, eliminates him from this year's tournament, and he becomes the first man to finish him in his professional career. I mean, it was just nuts.
He hadn't lost since 2017.
Crazy. I mean, just one of the, top talents, in terms of like featherweight outside of the UFC, hands down.
Yeah.
And Pinedo just timed a knee right up the middle perfectly, man. What a moment that was. I was just like going nuts sitting there on my couch watching. And then you had the Marlon Moraes, tough knockout there by Marlon. Glad he's okay, and he did, make the decision in the cage to retire. Really glad for Marlon to be making that decision. I think that's something that, like, a lot of fans have kind of wanted to see for a while from Marlon, because he's got nothing else to prove. I mean, he's done it all, and tough way to go out, but glad he's making the right decision.
Somebody on Twitter posted a picture of when he knocked out Aljo and said, "I'll always love you for this."
Poor Aljo, man.
I love it. And then also Bubba Jenkins, big win for him. Bubba Jenkins, man, I think that's another guy that just doesn't get the right amount of love and respect for being just, again, one of the top talents in the world outside of the UFC. Glad he's moving on as well. And then obviously, man, the light heavyweight division is just rough. PFL got killed this year, with the suspensions and stuff, unfortunately. But you still have Hamlet and Josh Silveira in there, so still some good names around in that as well. But
sounds like a good showing for what PFL really needed with all the bad news that they've gotten. So
absolutely. And like I said, we're going to be watching this, trying not to get too distracted by it, but I'm really excited for Cade Ruotolo and Tommy Longacher. So hopefully that should be kicking off here soon. But we will, if you are watching, feel free to chime in on that as well. But with that, boys, let us begin our journey through this pay-per-view, UFC 289. But before we do, John, as we always ask, rate, sub, follow, let the people know.
Alrighty. Well, like Nate said, we host a weekly mixed martial art podcast called the Neon Belly Podcast. We release new episodes every Monday. We give our picks and predictions for the upcoming fights like we will tonight, and recap every event. We also hit the biggest news and headlines around the sport of MMA, while also sprinkling in some occasional MMA-themed games, challenges, or fun facts, as Nate loves to do.
I got one tonight.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I got a fun fact.
I got to make sure they know. You can check out the pod on all streaming platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We do ask that you subscribe to the pod on whatever streaming platform you prefer and give us a 5-star rating. Give us a follow on our socials at Neon Belly Podcast. At Neon Belly Pod for Twitter, but we're trying to change that as well. We also ask that you follow the MMA Underground at the UG on all socials. Make sure you click that subscribe button and turn on the notifications so you know not just the next time we're live, but all the other great content that the UG includes, including interviews and other weekly content and shows.
Absolutely. Shout out to the Mixed Martial Arts MMA Underground. Appreciate John Morgan and Cody Merrow for allowing us to come in and do this the night before every big pay-per-view. We're excited. So with that, boys, let us roll it in. UFC 289. And I think we can start because I feel like this is a card that has really received a lot of hate. Maybe not being the strongest, in terms of the biggest names, but I ultimately feel this comes back to, we were just kind of talking about before we went live, the argument that I had a couple of weeks ago on our podcast. We were kind of talking the whole quality over quantity thing with the UFC. That was kind of like a hot, button issue there for like a week on Twitter, right? So we kind of jumped in. Brandon, I know you weren't here for that episode, but essentially what I said is I think we're seeing an era in mixed martial arts, in the UFC, because it has gotten so big, especially the UFC, that you don't necessarily, my argument is, I don't think you necessarily have to be the biggest mixed martial arts fan to be a fan of the UFC. Sure, to some extent, those obviously have to go hand in hand. But ultimately, I think there is a population of the fan base that only enjoys like the pageantry and the big fight feel with the big names and the stars of the sport that a UFC pay-per-view can bring. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Like I said that week, that's not me like turning my nose up to somebody that only wants big, like fine. Like I said, however you fan, go for it. Like I'm here for it. Just watch. Like that's great with me. But I will say, I think if you are a fan of mixed martial arts, just the sport in general, you can't say this isn't a good card because there is some absolute bangers on this fight card. But just kind of your guys' thoughts on that in general, because I feel like that is a big talking point, especially when you're looking at the main event and with, a lot of people thinking the co-main's bigger than the main. Like there's just been a lot of talk about that.
No, I think it makes sense. And even me, like I would say I'm an MMA fan, right? I don't just watch UFC. I try to sprinkle in a little, like obviously I would say UFC is my main source of MMA, right? But I do watch other shows when I can. But I still think, like, even further down than that, I know, like, handfuls of people who only watch McGregor cards, right? I know handfuls of people who only watch John Jones and things like that. So, I don't know. I mean, I think that's obviously out there. And I do agree that we're in an era where that's just kind of accepted. I think, like, as long as you're just into the sport at some level, I think that's fine. I don't think everyone has to be gung-ho on every single piece of MMA that's out there. So, I think that's okay. But
no, I totally agree. What do you think?
Shout out to Cody Merrow. He said, "We out here" in the chat.
That's right. That's right.
But kind of leaning back to what I talked about when we did talk about this topic, there is a little bit of prices keep going up. Some of these cards have lost. The co-main event was supposed to be on a whole different card, right? So, sometimes you lose and you sacrifice some of that. I don't think this is necessarily one of those that have, because like we do have a title fight. We've had pay-per-views with no title fight in the main event, which still sell, and some of those are still good, but that's kind of a crazy ask sometimes for what they're charging.
But let me ask you guys this thing, because like with the whole co-main, the discrepancy, like do I sit here and think Oliveira versus Dariush is the bigger fight? Probably. But let's be honest, like there's not many fights out there right now, maybe even some title fights, even outside of Amanda and Irene Aldana, who it'd be a bigger fight. You go back to Cejudo Aljo. I mean, I think, and I'm not saying that Dariush Oliveira would have felt bigger than that fight, but in terms of the engagement and the numbers, I saw Juliana Pena talking about how the the lightweight fight, the co-main, is getting more engagement. But it's like, I think whatever it was going to get, it's going to get regardless, because it's just a big fight.
Right.
You know, no matter how you look at it, where you put it on the card, I mean, it's just a big fight regardless. You know?
Yeah, and you know, we've also had a bad string of injuries and replacements, and that doesn't help things either. So I think they're doing the best they can with what they have available. Yeah. Especially as you have, I mean, we have all the way through September just nothing but huge fights now. So I think you're going to see a lot of that kind of filter out where, you know, we went through a little rough patch the past couple months. I think moving forward, everything just seems huge.
And I get the argument, you know, you kind of brought up the money thing, and you know, people are like, oh, you want us to pay for this. And I can hear that a little bit, you know, understand the frustration. But my thing is, tomorrow night, when these athletes who are the best in the world, right, at what they do, get locked in a cage in front of this Canadian fan base that never, ever disappoints, right? Always brings like just brings straight fire from the beginning. To me, the stage is set, and I think we are just going to be in for some fantastic fights. At the end of the day, like, it's going to create that atmosphere itself.
Yeah, I think one thing I remind myself, or after fights usually, like, I'll be watching a fight, let's say two guys I'm just not real familiar with, right? And I'm not super amped for it like I would be an Oliveira Dariush. Once the fight started and I'm watching these two guys engage, I end up just falling in love with the fight, just like I do every other fight, right?
Yeah,
so I think if you enjoy MMA on that at that level, I think it really doesn't matter who you're watching. Eventually, you're just going to watch it and you're going to enjoy it anyway.
And and not everybody's going to deep dive on, you know, Mike Mallet versus you know, Adam Fouguet like we are. You know, I totally understand that, but again, they're in this spot for a reason. Trust me. Hopefully we can add some excitement to these fights a little bit, do our part a little bit. I don't know, maybe not. But with that, let us get into it. UFC, that's a lot of pressure, right?
Yeah.
289 tomorrow night, June 10th, from the Rogers Arena in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And I will tell you guys, Vancouver is one of my favorite places on planet Earth. And I'm not exaggerating. I think anybody that knows me, John, you might know it, Brandon probably not. Shout out to East Van while we're on that topic, by the way. But as I always do, you know, I got a little fun fact, as John mentioned, about Vancouver, and that is that in 1947, a law was passed making it illegal to sell stoves on a Wednesday within the Vancouver city limits.
As it should be.
As it should. That's right, as the good Lord intended. But after almost 40 years, the law was eventually repealed. Brandon, you for or against that law?
I mean, I want to know what it was for. I'm probably for it, honestly.
I did a lot of research. I did the digging. There's nothing. I got into some like really weird Vancouver residential forums.
Couldn't figure it out.
None of them knew.
Yeah, I bought a membership to go through newspapers from the 40s.
Exactly. So with that, boys, let us kick this off with just an absolute, what I think, banger, kicking off, you know, the middleweight division, and that is not what I said in the middleweight division, excuse me, number 12, Nasruddin Imavov versus number 14, Chris Curtis. Boys, the French Daggy Imavov kicked off 2023 in the UFC's first main event of the year. That night back in January, he did lose a unanimous decision to Curtis's teammate, Sean Strickland. I think even Imavov would agree, probably not his best performance, right? Not his best outing. He was pretty much shut down by Strickland in that whole fight, especially after like round 1, going into round 2, I believe. John, you just did the big crazy eyes. You made me nervous.
Well, I was just like, I kind of forgot it was on. I was like, oh shoot, there's fights.
And now Strickland's Extreme Couture teammate looking to do the double here. Back-to-back pay-per-views appearances for Chris Curtis. I mean, he is coming in off the loss to the returning Kelvin Gastelum back in April at UFC 288. Fairly close fight, and if you remember, Curtis had to overcome getting dropped by that accidental headbutt, you know, in round 2. But either way, both of these guys looking to bounce back off their losses and grab their first W of the year. Brandon, your thoughts and ultimately your pick for this fight.
This is a 1 point, right?
Yeah.
So just the person.
Real quick. So the Imavov, when he fought Strickland, that was short notice for Strickland, right? He came in.
Yeah,
short
and
notice.
Strickland had only fought like a couple weeks before. Strickland was like the last and the first. He was the last pay-per-view of like 2022 and the first of 2023.
Did they actually make 85, or was it a little bit heavier?
Ooh.
Because I want to say it was
that should have been my fun fact.
I thought it was a little heavier. Because, what surprised me about that was Imavov did not push like he normally does. The offense just wasn't there, which is probably a lot easier said than done when you got Strickland in your face, jabbing your head off, right?
Yeah.
So, anyway, that being said, I think Imavov returns to form here. I like him against Curtis. I'm going to take Imavov. It's 1 point, so I don't need to get any more specific. So, I'll take him.
Man, it's always weird when Curtis has fought people Strickland's fought. You kind of think that he's going to have this, like, oh, you know, he's going to do the same thing Strickland did, or he's going to have this advantage, but they don't fight as much as they have like a similar like tone to their fights. They don't fight the same. And that's what makes this hard to use that as a comparison point. If I'm looking at what Curtis did, you know, in his last couple fights, because I thought that obviously the Jack Hermanson fight was one that we were just like, whoa, I did not see this coming. But I don't know. Imavov has so many different more tools in his bag than Jack Hermanson was kind of throwing out.
Right.
And Curtis, I thought he beat Kelvin. I thought he had a really good performance, and he's just a dog there, man. I'm gonna go with Curtis. I think that if he puts a pace on him, I think he can do something similar to what Strickland did, and maybe he might break this little thing of him fighting Strickland's former opponents.
And I'm with you, man. Like, I'm trying not to look so much into that shared opponent aspect, right? Because we did see it. You know, the last guy was Jack Hermanson, where Hermanson lost to Strickland, but then faced Curtis next time out and beat Curtis. And now here we are with Imavov in a similar situation. Lost to Strickland, you know, obviously, and now he's facing Chris Curtis. Maybe there's nothing to that, but in the Hermanson fight, I did lean heavily on I think that's where it is for me, is I lean so heavily on the aspect that, oh, Strickland just beat him. Like, you know, the book's there. Like, he's just going to hand him the book. Like, here's how you do it. But like you said, that's a little unfair to Chris Curtis as well, because they are different fighters, right? Just because they train together doesn't make them similar in skill set or style or anything like that. I do think I'm going to leave Imavov here, not necessarily for that reason. You know, I see this as a pretty even battle on the feet, if I'm being honest. You know, you kind of have like the power of Chris Curtis, right, with the, you know, kind of technique more of Imavov. I do think Imavov is capable of getting this fight down, but he hasn't really shown anything exceptional with the takedowns either, you know, that makes me think he's going to crack Chris Curtis's 100% takedown defense. You know what I mean? But even if it stays standing, I think I like Imavov in that matchup, because I think he can kind of just stay on the outside and just kind of pick at Curtis a little bit. You know, he's a really big middleweight, uses his size and length pretty well. We've seen Curtis frustrated with that when guys just kind of utilize that jab and make it hard for him to kind of get on the inside.
Jack Hermanson.
Again, back to the Jack Hermanson. I mean, even Kelvin did a pretty good job, and Kelvin's not the biggest, you know, middleweight. Yeah, it wasn't middleweight. Kelvin's going down. That's when back down. Now, I will say, Imavov has shown a shaky gas tank. It did almost cost him late in that Buckley fight. If you remember, he was up 2-0 on Buckley and almost lost it in the third.
And Curtis has really good body shots. He works the body really, really well. That's kind of what I was leaning with. Just being able to just put a pace on him, go to the body, and just work his way through, and then by the third round, hopefully get to something.
Yeah, so we'll see. I do think it's a closely contested matchup in terms of just, you know,
this
the
whole
style.
Card is that.
It really is.
I don't feel good about nothing. I'm just, I'm literally like flipping a coin in my head, and right when you go to me, I'm like, all right, it's head. So let me put this person in that spot.
Yeah, but you know, and like, cause like we saw even in the Gastelum fight with Curtis, he was still there in the third round, going for it, even despite getting dropped by that headbutt. You know, he still had to go at it right there at the end, trying to finish. So he's going to be there in the third round. So can Imavov's, you know, cardio hold up late? We'll have to see. I don't know yet. But Imavov is pretty sound defensively. So I just like him to get it done overall. So that's where I'm going. But just a great fight, kicking off the prelims, like I said.
I mean, if this isn't in Canada, this might be on the main card. It's a really big fight for the middleweight division as far as like trying to stay in that middle ground.
Absolutely.
To make your way up.
And yeah, I was going to bring that up later, but we can kind of stop here before we jump into the main card. I think that's what it is a lot, too, with this main card is you have to think they're going to Canada. That's a massive, you know, market for them. You can't go without Canadians on the card, right? They have to be on the main card. And if we're being honest, there's not like a ton of like super high level Canadian talent right now.
Don't got GSP no more.
Yeah, right. You know, but I mean, you can go back to like the Mark Hominick days, like him versus Jose Aldo was just like, dude, Jose Aldo went to Canada to fight Mark Hominick. You know what I mean? Like, so it's just like they just don't necessarily have like the biggest, but you have to have them here. You just you have to put them on here. So. Yeah, you're right. Maybe on any other given day, this would be, you know, one of those ones. But I had that in my notes further down. Hopefully, I don't read it again. But
either way,
I'm like Anchorman. What's his name?
Steve Carell.
No.
Oh,
Will Ferrell.
I
have to read whatever.
What's on the teleprompter?
Boys, moving back, kicking off the main card, back in the middleweight division, we have Marc-Andre Barriault versus Eric, your boy, Anders. Boys, Marc-Andre Barriault comes in on a mixed run of form, having gone 2-2 in his last form, but
his last fight.
Yeah. Well, he's coming off the second round knock, TKO over Julian Marquez back in March. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah. His opponent, Eric Anders, comes in on a similar run of form. He is also 2-2 in his last 4, also coming in off a second round TKO win, his win over Kyle Dawkins last time out. So 2 guys here whose careers have, sort of mirrored each other kind of as of late, but one will walk away with consecutive wins tomorrow night. The question is, who do you like, Brandon, and why?
Well, so I feel like this is one of those John's just said where I'm going to kind of flip a coin here.
Yeah.
I went back and watched both these guys' fights, the last 2 for each of them, and I couldn't really feel confident about either. But I did like, I'm going to butcher the name, Marc-Andre, is that?
Yeah, Barriault.
Yeah, Barriault, we'll do that. Yeah, I'm going to take him. I liked him in his... I
hope I'm saying it right.
Okay. No. I just feel like he has a few more tools in the toolbox as far as getting it done on the ground and being a little more diverse there. So I just like that about him. Yeah. But ultimately, these 2, I feel like it is a toss-up. I know they're both coming in, like you said, the 2-2. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, leaning him here. That's where I'm going.
Dude, this man Marc-Andre might have thrown like 1,000 uppercuts in that second round against Julian Marquez. He just put his forehead to his forehead and just continuously. Right. And even when he had him open, he got close to him just so he could keep throwing them. And I think this is going to be a battle of attrition. I think it's going to be who, once you get into past that first round, because we've seen, you said Barriault, right? Barriault. Yeah. We've seen him get ambushed in the first round and have to, come back in a second.
Right.
But Anders I think he has a little bit more juice in the tank than what Julian Marquez was bringing as far as being able to do that into a second round and kind of maintain that. So I'm going to take Anders in this one just because I think that he's going to be able to keep on. Like if he rushes him and he's able to put it on him in the first, I think he can keep doing that. And I think with Marc-Andre, he kind of was fading in that second round, but he was just kept landing over and over. And I don't know if Andre is going to have that same problem that Julian Marquez had.
See, this is where I completely disagree with John. I'm going with the power bar Barriault. Andre's big, strong middleweight, heavy hands, pretty good wrestling takedowns. Worth mentioning as well, Anders is coming off that win over Dawkins, where physically he even just looked better. Probably one of his best performances I think we've seen from him in the UFC. I have the word attrition written down as well, John. I think it does come down to attrition, which is why I'm going Barriault. But not many humans can go blow for blow with a guy like Julian Marquez, let alone finish him and overwhelm him the way that Barriault did. That's where I disagree with you on, thinking that Anders, might have that edge even on a guy like Marquez. We've seen cardio be an issue for Anders as well, especially later into fights. Barriault does have to be careful, like I said, of the power. But again, you don't want to get stuck under Anders either. That's another worry for me if he does get him down. You don't want to get stuck there.
Yeah, because Andre has that loss to Fluffy, right?
Yeah.
Yes. But I just think Barriault, like Brandon said, just a little bit better everywhere. You know what I mean? I just think he's just a little better. So give me power bar for the win. And John, I don't know where you're at on that one. That's interesting.
I just feel like
more than Julian Marquez.
Well, Julian Marquez looked really great, and then he hasn't. Like his last 2-3 fights were just kind of like he kind of fell off, and it's like, well, maybe it was the competition he was going against. And with Anders, you're right. He looked best his last fight, so I'm kind of going off of that as well.
Yeah, he did look really good in the last one, but man, I can't get behind. I'm like overhyping Julian Marquez, but that dude like I said, not many people. This dude literally came back from the dead and beat people.
Well, and I thought it just felt weird the way that Marquez just wouldn't move out from, like I said, those uppercuts that he was throwing. He didn't have a clinch and was throwing the uppercut. He was just kind of leaning against him and throwing him, and he never circled or tried to go for a takedown himself. And I don't know that Anders is not going to do those things.
Fair enough. Next fight, boys. I still think you're wrong. Next fight, boys, in the featherweight division. Just cue the sirens for this one. Holy cow. And while you're at it, take a look at the bicep, boys. I am so freaking juiced for this
aboard,
fight.
Baby.
Number 13, Dan 50K Ige versus the Night Train, Nate Landwehr, or the Train, sorry, not the Night Train, not Gladys Knight.
Come on, man.
Again, man, when you talk about some of the hate I've seen towards this card, and a lot of people saying, Oliveira and Dariush are the only thing worth watching and blah, blah, blah. I mean, if you are a mixed martial arts fan and you love this sport and this fight doesn't get the blood coursing through your veins, I got nothing for you.
Yeah.
Because, just inject it straight into me. Like, I am so pumped for this fight. These are, two absolute warriors who never leave anything but everything in the cage, right? Dan Ige comes into this fight just 1-3 in his last 4. For the first time in his professional career, he not only dropped consecutive losses, but he has lost 3 straight. Context is important here, though, right? Because those losses were to Korean Zombie, Josh Emmett, and Movsar Evloev consecutively. But he got back to winning ways in January with the second-round knockout over Damon Jackson. His opponent, Nate the Train, is one of the more exciting guys out right now. Not just his fighting style, but also the mic skills. You just almost want him to win just so he gets a mic. Yeah. He's coming in with a ton of momentum, having won his last 3 straight. All 3 were fun, exciting fights as well. Make no mistake, though, he is stepping in with the toughest test of his UFC career, who is one of the most seasoned veterans in this featherweight division as well. And a top 15 ranking 100% has to be on the line here, I'm sure.
Right.
With a win, Nate the Train probably ascends into the rankings. With a loss, a guy like Dan Ige probably sees his name slip from there. So who do you guys have? I think last I saw, Landwehr's like a plus 300 underdog. He's a pretty significant underdog if I remember. I could be way off on that though.
So I want Nate to win, but that's not my pick. My pick is Ige, okay? And the reason being, this is not a knock on Nate, but because of that streak Ige was put on, his last fight was against Damon Jackson, right? I feel like in that fight, Ige showed that, okay, look, there's levels to this, right? Just because he went on that skid, you look at who he lost to.
Yeah.
Don't forget who Dan Ige is. So I think this is another fight. I think Dan Ige is coming into this fight with that same energy. Yeah. Where he's like, look, don't keep feeding me these guys. I still deserve top prospects here. I'm looking to make it, not just be a guy that people can make names off of. So I like Ige here. So give me Dan Ige.
Fair enough.
You know who I'm going with, baby. It's the Train, man. I think there's something to momentum, and I think there's something to confidence, and I think that I don't know if there's anybody in the UFC who has more confidence than Nate Landwehr in the suit, with the velvet suit with the chain on. Yeah. When you talk about mic skills, it's just he never gets flustered. As he talks, everything just rolls through, and I think that's how his fights look too. You never see him you see him get hyped, but you never just see him get too high or too low. And I think he's shown so many different ways that he's able to get in and out of these fights, bad situations, getting dropped his last fight. And he was like, I don't even remember that. That's how cold I am. I don't even remember getting dropped out, but he just finds a way, man. And I just want to keep seeing it. So I'm going to speak it into existence. I'm taking Nate.
Yeah. What do you say? I've waited all this time to say it. Nate the Train's at the press conference or something like that. I love it. Yeah. Just go ahead and hit it again. Yeah. I think I'm just ever so slightly going to lean Nate Landwehr here. I'm with Brandon. It is tough where you're like, you know who you want. Then it's like, who do you take? He is coming in, as I mentioned, as an underdog, but he's coming in with so much steam and momentum. I think the matchup sells itself, obviously. I don't need to tell you how great this fight is and how fun it'll be.
Could have been a fight night headline.
Yeah, for sure. Both of these guys extremely well-rounded as well. I know you think about the striking usually for both, but both of these guys have shown really good grappling abilities as well, and Nate even saying in the press conference I'm definitely shooting early, you know what I mean? And with him, who knows, right? He might not. Now I do think it's going to play largely out on the feet though. And when I look at the tangibles going into this, right, the things that I do know is Ige, obviously, as I mentioned, the most experience in facing the top UFC talent, but kind of the problem is with me is he always comes up short against that talent. You look at the biggest win on his UFC records, and it's Edson Barbosa.
Yeah.
Great name, by the way. I'm not saying that's not a good win, but I think that's exactly the level that we're kind of seeing Nate Landwehr at right now. Now, the problem for Nate is these are usually the fights Ige beats, right? In these spots against these guys, his rankings on the line, these are usually the ones that he beats. But again, I love where Landwehr is coming into this. He seems to have all the confidence. He's going to have to be mindful of the big shots. He's a guy that likes to charge forward and just come forward. He has to be careful. But another thing to remember about Nate is he is newer to the UFC, but he's a former M1 featherweight champion. He knows how to win in big moments, and I think he will do it here. So, yeah, definitely give me Nate Landwehr. This one's hard. It is a little hard to, like, kind of separate your pick a little, you know, because, like, Ige is such a stud, man, but it's like...
Well, and one of my themes, like, from this point moving on in the card, but... Well, not as much the next fight, but the co-main and main, and then even this one is sometimes for me to pick who I like, I have to kind of forget how good the person that they're going against is, or like have to like downplay some of the things they've done because it's like, wait a minute, this is Dan Ige, but I really like Nate, so
yeah. And I'm not like saying like, you know, when I say, you know, Ige's never beat, you know, some of these bigger guys. I'm not saying that I think Nate Landwehr is on that level yet, you know, but when you look at the guys, you know, like a guy like Edson Barbosa, who is ranked number 15, it's like, I think Landwehr's right in there. You know what I mean? And so we'll see. It's going to be a fun matchup, though.
Oh, yeah.
I could honestly see it being 3 hard, crazy rounds, honestly.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it can't be.
Could be fight of the night, man. There's a very good chance.
Oh, yeah, I mean, if it's not, we're really in for it.
Yeah, there's going to be a great knockout if it's not the fight of the night, I feel like.
Oh, yeah, I'm really hyped, boys. Moving into the welterweight division, we have Mike Malott versus Adam Fugit. These are two relatively newer additions to the UFC roster, but both men have shown flashes of potential. You know, Malott enters off the Dana White Contender Series. Since then, he's gone a perfect 2-0 in the UFC. And here's what excites me most about Mike Malott. He is on a 5-fight win streak in his career with 5 straight first-round finishes, 3 by submission, 2 by TKO. His opponent, Fugit, debuted last year, sits 1-1 in the UFC. His last win was a first-round TKO over Kinoshita back in February. I hope I didn't butcher that too bad. So you can see, though, why they put this fight here. Again, you know, both guys on 9 pro wins, you know, Malott's finishes, you know, and I think when you look deeper into Malott's finishes as well, it's not even just the 5 straight first-round finishes. Of his 9 professional wins, all 9 are by first-round finish. None of Malott's fights have ever left the first round other than he has 1 majority draw on his record. That's the only one. The rest, even his loss, he lost in the first round. But again, you know, this is definitely them trying to showcase some young Canadian talent. I'm all for it. And if we're being honest, again, like I said, you look around, there's just not a ton of it. Right. But this is a really fun, exciting guy. So I don't know who you guys like.
I like Mike Malott here. I mean, I don't know how you just kind of teed that all up. I don't know how you like listen to all that and then go, well, I don't know. I kind of, if you get my...
I know. I feel like I kind of sold on Fugit.
Yeah, I know. So, I mean, but it is what it is, right? Like 5 straight first-round finishes. I mean, the knockout he had of Mickey Gall, oh my gosh. Like, I rewatched that fight and I was like, I kind of forgot about that, honestly. I went back and watched it and I said, oh, yeah, that's this guy, right?
Yeah.
And that's not to say, like you said, the 3 submissions wins as well. So he's got skills all across the board. So, and he's, you know, the Canadian piece, I think that's something that's very important here. Like you said, you're in his hometown or in his home country, let's say, and that's gotta really help a guy like him out here. So I like Mike Malott here. That's my take. Yeah. That's my pick.
And the other, it's Fugit.
Fugit. Yeah.
Fugit to make picks like this. What is interesting about Fugit too, though, is out of his wins, only 1 of them went to a decision. All the rest of his are also finishes as well. So this is a battle of like big time finishers.
It totally makes sense. Yeah. The matchup.
But if I'm not going to give the hometown edge to Barrio, I will give it to Malott. Yeah, I think that
it's a tough one.
You know, and this is like tailor made for him to, like you said, make his debut to the world of hey, Canada has another one. It's me.
Yeah,
first round something. You know, like that's his chance to do that. And if he can do that, I mean, that kind of writes itself for the next time they come up to Canada. He's probably on a way bigger fight.
No, I 100%. I mean, I agree 100%. And where I think Landwehr and Ige could steal the show in terms of fight of the night, I can see this being performance of the night. Big finish bonus. And I'm agreeing. I think this is just like a big coming out party for a guy like Mike Malott. You know, I'm trying not to, you know, again, Fugit he is long, he's rangy, but man, he does get hit a lot. You know, we've seen it a couple times. He does have a pretty good chin. He does seem durable. So I think too, if he can survive that early storm and kind of drag Malott deep, who knows what Malott's cardio will look like later in the fight, right? But you just can't let a guy like Mike Malott hit you either. I think he could do it early. He could continue that first round streak. Again, Fugit is tough, so Malott may have to see a round 2 for the first time in the UFC. But I am expecting him to get it done tonight. And again, this is one where if you don't know, like, I hate to be Dana White guy right now, but if you don't know, now you know, because this could really be a good fight. I mean, I really think so. And like I said, Malott has just been amped up all week long. Super excited for it. Boys, here we go into the co-main event. Ooh. Yeah, this is the one we've been waiting for, right? And it's a big one. In the lightweight division, number 1, Charles Oliveira versus number 4, Beneil Dariush. And I said it before they even booked this fight at UFC 288. You guys were probably dang near. I am like so hot. It is getting so warm in here. I'm like over it.
Well, here's the thing. Me having my air out all last week, I'm doing kind of good right now.
Yeah, I'm kind of used to it. I said it even before, though. You guys almost were probably sick of me saying it before they booked it. This was the biggest non-title matchup that the UFC could make, you know. So when it fell off of UFC 288, I'm glad the UFC decided to rebook it instead of just replace Oliveira. We need this fight, and I'm glad that we're getting to see it. The former champ Oliveira obviously returning after his lightweight title loss in October to new champ Islam Makhachev, and don't give me that it was vacant crap either. We all know that was his belt, so don't give me that. I don't want to hear who's the vacant title. During his title run, though, Oliveira broke the UFC record for most finishes, a streak that has now been extended to 19 for the Brazilian, and the record for most submissions with 16. And other than Oliveira, no one in this division is more deserving of a UFC title shot with a win tomorrow than his opponent, Beneil Dariush. Dariush comes in on a 8-fight win streak. Crazy in this division. His last win was over Matej Gamrot at UFC 280 in October of last year. And this is a guy who has had to stay patient, right? Wait for his chance. He's battled through setbacks, injuries. You know, you remember he was supposed to face Islam Makhachev last year, or over a year ago. Breaks his ankle, spends over a year and a half on the side, or right at about a year and a half on the sideline, comes back, beats an absolute killer in Gamrot, then gets the Oliveira fight. That fight falls off. So I'm sure if you're Beneil at that point, you're thinking, oh gosh, here we go again. But they were able to save that fight. Here we are, 2 of the best lightweights in the world, squaring off tomorrow night. One will leave with a title shot, and the champ, Islam Makhachev, next. Question mark.
Yeah.
I saw the press conference. I saw Dana was just kind of like, oh, you know, that makes the most sense. It's like, yeah, no, 100%. Like, nothing else makes sense. You know, I don't know what else there is to see. That is a good point. Maybe they are waiting. But if Beneil wins, there's no way.
Yeah,
you say that, but we thought last time it was no way. We thought they even told him that he wasn't the number 1 contender if he would have won, the other fight. They said it was more toward Dustin Poirier was the number 1 contender. So we don't even know where they have these guys ranked at in their head for as far as who's going to get the title shot.
Yeah. It's an interesting one, but because I kind of was expecting, like, I don't know what happened to our stream. I don't know if it just.
This is still saying.
Is it glitching out on us?
I don't know.
There it goes. It's back. Dude. Oh, it's in and out.
Well, maybe my foot's touching something. I don't know.
Can you just jiggle the cord? Yeah, I don't know, man. I just thought it was kind of like foregone conclusion, but I didn't even think about that whole aspect with Connor and Chandler too. Brandon, who you got?
Okay, this one was really tough. I went back and forth for a minute on this one, and one of the things that super impressed me about Dariush was his last fight with Gamrot, where he just his anti-wrestling, his jiu-jitsu he utilized in that fight was super impressive. I think I forget sometimes that Dariush is like a 3-time, excuse me guys, a 3-time world no-gi. Yeah, it just gets me, man. But no, I forget sometimes that Dariush is a 3-time no-gi world champ, okay, in jiu-jitsu. Like, he has a decorated jiu-jitsu career as well. And I think that he's not going to be afraid to hang with Oliveira on the ground. I think if you go in not afraid of Oliveira like Islam did, then you can really kind of put Oliveira on his heels. And Oliveira gets dropped all the time. Dariush hits really hard. So I actually like Dariush here. So I'm going to take Beneil Dariush, and I'm going to take him by first round knockout.
Ooh. Alrighty.
Oh, man. it's hard for me to highlight how Beneil wins this without trying to like slightly overlook how great Charles has looked these past fights before the Islam fight. And even in that fight, I felt like the flying knee was a huge mistake, and that's what led to, you know, obviously the punch to the chest. He gets dropped, obviously, and then the sub happens. And, you know, with Dariush, it feels like he feels like he has the advantage everywhere, but I don't know exactly if that's true in the sense of, you know, we haven't seen, he does have really good jiu-jitsu, but we haven't seen the level of submissions that we've seen from like a Charles. And even with the stand-up, Charles's power, the people he's putting out are people who don't get put out. And we haven't seen that necessarily from Dariush yet either, because he hasn't got a chance to fight those guys, to be fair, because of injuries and, you know, unfortunate situations. And whereas the Gamrot, he's a high-level wrestler, so there was some really great scrambles there. Oliveira's not going to go for those scrambles aren't going to come from Oliveira shooting. He's going to go from the clinch. You know, you might see a trip. You might see him grab a guillotine and pull guard or something like that. So I think it's going to be a different type of scramble, and that's something I'm really excited to see. And I don't know, man. I want to see Dariush and Islam really bad. I think it'd be a great fight, but I don't know if he has enough to beat Charles, because the only person we've seen be able to put it through Charles is Islam. These other guys who are very great fighters, you know, were able to hit him and hurt him and still couldn't finish him. And he was able to find a way to finish these people who aren't getting finished except for by the top guys like Habib, Islam, or now Charles. So I'm going to roll with Charles. I'm going to say that the last fight was maybe not him on his best day, but him on his best day I think can beat anybody. And we just haven't seen Beneil do that against the same guys that we've seen Charles do it against. And Beneil can definitely prove me wrong, but I'm going to go Charles Oliveira, and I'm going to say second round sub.
Yeah, like when I was thinking, I was like, I mean, where do you even start with this matchup, right? You know, both of these guys extremely well-rounded. They're both the pinnacle of the sport in terms of talent and skill. But I just think, gun to my head, man, I really like Benny Dariush here. I think there's few men, I'm kind of with Brandon on this. I think there's few men in this sport that can go technique for technique with the UFC's all-time sub finisher, Oliveira. But I think Benny is one of them who can. I mean, you look at what he did to Gamrot, and Gamrot's like an 80cc level grappler, you know? Oliveira has been so good at catching guys in the scramble, and before they know it, he's on their back and they're getting choked. But Benny is super sound defensively with his grappling. He's great at creating scrambles, and he just doesn't settle in bad positions. You know, he's just not willing to concede those spots. I also think his leg kicks can work really well for him here, especially since I don't think Oliveira is going to be a takedown threat for him. Now, I will say, do give Oliveira the advantage on the feet, but I don't think Benny is coming in to strike with Oliveira. I really don't. You know, he wants a title shot. He saw the Islam fight with Oliveira. I think he knows he's more than capable of kind of deploying a similar game plan. I'm by no means saying it's going to be easy. He's going to have to be alert defensively everywhere this fight goes, especially getting into that clinch range where we know Oliveira is just so dangerous. But I think he grinds out a win here. Give me Benny Dariush by second round sub. And ultimately, in my opinion as well, I just kind of, like John said, you know, and you guys can kind of like tell me if you agree with this. I know, John, you kind of said it there. People in the chat can let me know if they agree. But Benny is the toughest fight for Islam Makhachev in this division right now, in my opinion. That's what I said. You know, I do think Oliveira would have an advantage in a rematch as well. But, man, I just can't sit here and act like I wouldn't rather see Benny get a chance. I also think I'm putting a lot of value in the moment as well. Like, something just feels like this is Dariush's moment to me.
Just side note, do you feel like that you would feel any differently had you not seen Islam and Volk?
Ooh.
Because I feel like his fight with Volk really changed a lot of people's kind of views on Islam. Like, he looked very human in that fight.
That's a good I don't know, man. Yeah, I still think I would think Benny's the toughest fight for him in the division. Okay. I really do. The only other person that I would maybe say would be a Sarukian, just because, you know, the skill set. And, you know, but even
obviously
like
they fought.
And they fought. So that's the thing, too. You do wonder, you know, some of these guys, like Habib never rematched anybody, correct?
Right.
You know, so like even like a guy like Islam, if he starts, you know, rematching guys, you know, it is interesting to see some of these, you know, daggy guys who've been so dominant as they start. What, you got something?
Your boy Dorman, Charles, TKO, second round, baby.
TKO second round. I do think I think Charles does finish, he's going to finish it earlier. Like, that's just I really feel that way. But yeah, I don't know. I just think with like Sarukian even too, like, losing the Gamrot fight and stuff, that obviously kind of set him back. But I do think it is interesting as we start seeing some of these guys have to go back around, the Daggy guys, how people can adjust to that. So that's where I say, it would be interesting to see it for Charles, but I just think skill set wise, Benny's the toughest matchup for Islam right now at 155 pounds.
Well, and the other thing is you hope that Benny hasn't been drawn out too long.
Yeah.
Because we've seen that with certain guys. Like Tony Ferguson is like, this is the guy to be Habib. And then he gets drug out so long, he runs into 3 or 4 guys where it's just like, oh, he lost. With that Tony that we had thought could do it, he's not that guy anymore. And you hope that Beneil doesn't keep on getting stretched out like this because that gets tough. And then even for Charles, I wonder how the further he gets away from that weight miss fiasco and all that, if he's able to kind of get back to that. I know, but I'm saying like that affected him because like that changed his money that he was getting for the fight. Obviously, the title defense situation, like there was a lot that got that was a little bit different for that. So as he gets further away from that, I wonder how he starts, if he can get back to that form that got him to the title and getting it. So
did you guys think Benny looked rough on the scale? I thought that kind of made me a little nervous.
He always looks kind
of. He
just
looks old now, dude. He's got so much white hair and stuff.
Yeah,
he's only like 34.
I know, it's so weird.
Yeah, it cracks me up in the embedded too. He just seems so uninterested. Yeah. Which I mean, again, that's just like him. You don't look too much into that. But yeah, I was thinking something else too. Okay, let's say Dariush wins. Okay, Oliveira loses. You look at a guy like Oliveira. Do you start fighting? Some of these lower ranked guys. Try to work yourself. Do you guys think because I think the answer to this is yes. I'll tell you my answer. I think Oliveira could be competitive at welterweight.
Yeah,
he's got so much power.
And he's got the range. I think he has the size. Like if he came up and did it kind of the right way, I really think Oliveira could be a legit welterweight.
Yeah, because I think he looks big at a lightweight sometimes.
I mean, the dude's crying about having to make weight, right? Yeah. So I don't think he would be too upset about not having to cut, not having to cut that extra 15 pounds.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I was just thinking about that today, and then you kind of start thinking of some of those matchups, and I mean, it's just like, whoa.
Yeah, and his skill set compared to the some of the guys that would be at the same level,
right?
He'd match up really, really well.
Yeah, I mean, and we've talked about guys like this past week we talked about like a Max coming up to 55, and I mean him in a super fight between him and Oliveira would be super fun as well. I mean, you could that one against Oliveira could lose, and that's still a massive fight that he could kind of stick around at 55, and with a win, we'd still be right around there. But if not, man, I can't act like I wouldn't want to see do Bronx move up to welterweight. I think it'd be interesting. I think he's got the frame for it if he kind of filled it out right. But I was just kind of thinking that today, like, man, that would be. There's some matchups for sure.
Oh, yeah.
And here we are, boys. We are going to move right into our main event, the last fight of the night for the women's bantamweight title. And the queen is Bike. She's back, baby. Amanda Nunes returns to her title on the line against the number 5 ranked Irene Aldana. And sometimes, boys, in mixed martial arts, it always ends up the way it was supposed to be, right? And I think a lot of fans felt Aldana, possibly even Raquel Pennington, was probably supposed to be next for Nunes anyways. So I think when the promotion booked them against each other, a lot of people were like really confused by that, right? And then, obviously, they booked the trilogy fight for Pena and Nunes. Puzzled a lot of people. But Pena, and that's also not to say that Pena wasn't deserving or that's not a great fight in its own. Like, I'm totally here to see those two run it back again for a third time. But we don't know how much more time we have left with Nunes, right? And for the first time in a while, it just feels like, she actually, it appears anyways that, she has some legit challengers. What you got?
Somebody in the chat said, why do you all look the same?
That is weird. Well, me and John, we
you guys dress the same, like all the time.
Yeah.
No, like when we were in elementary school, it would be like, hey,
always.
Nate or John, or are you?
Yeah, no, we still have people today that like swear we're related, and
you guys aren't brothers.
Yeah, and we try to tell, so we just don't even say. We're like,
glasses,
we just,
facial hair.
Yeah, you're just big with beards.
Yeah,
That's
I wear a black t-shirt like every time, so I don't. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I got similar like facial hair colors. Both wear glasses.
Yeah,
yours is just a little bit out, but maybe you're just like different moms or something, different dads.
But obviously Pena falls off. But like I said, it just feels like for the first time Nunes had some nice challengers there. So Pena falls off with the injury. And that bout between Aldana and Pennington is scrapped. Aldana is elevated to this role of challenger. And I believe Pennington did weigh in as the backup. I heard that. I didn't see that officially, but I thought that was the plan. So if anybody in the chat knows, they can let us know, but I'm not sure about that. But Nunes returns off her title rematch win over Juliana Pena last July. She did recapture her title after Pena took it off of her just one fight before that, a loss that snapped a 12-fight unbeaten streak for Amanda. Her opponent, Irene Aldana, comes in off back-to-back wins over Yana Santos and most recently a third-round body kick finish over Macy Chasson last September.
Nasty.
That was crazy. Yeah. But I remember a time before Juliana Pena when Amanda was a lock, and she was a pick for us. Like every time we're all going Amanda.
We almost skipped talking about the fight with her and Pena.
I know.
Why are we even talking about this? It's Amanda.
Yeah. But now that we've kind of seen she is human, right? Even with the bounce back win, you know, how much do you have or hope do you have in Aldana to possibly pull this upset off tomorrow night?
I have a ton of you may rephrase that question, but like I have a ton of, what's the word? I think she can do it. That's where I'm getting. Like, sure. I think because like you said, Nunes is human. We saw that with Pena, and I think the way she showed that was by getting in her face, right? Just not being willing to like step back, just getting in her face, making it a dogfight, and just kind of surprising her. And not with like the sharpest shots that we've ever seen, not with like the slickest technique, no hooks, anything like that. She just was unwilling to secede things, right? And I think with Irene, she's more than capable of doing that, but I also think that the little X factor here is between Moreno and Yair with their titles, right? I think that she's got this wave of momentum behind her with Mexico.
Yeah.
I think that she's just very, very, very much like this is her moment. This is her time. Yeah. And I think that's a big factor with this as well. And we just saw Nunes come back from even the rematch with Pena. Yeah, she won. She looked pretty dominant. Yeah. But there were still moments there for Pena. So it just kind of made me feel like, I don't know, man. So I like Irene here. Or do you want me to make my pick?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to take Aldana. I'm going to take her. I'm going to go with, this is where I kind of struggle. I think she can finish Nunes, and I think
she has to.
Yeah, so
I really do.
I think it gets done on the feet, honestly. I think if she can push the pace, like similar to Pena, she's got way better straight 1-2s down the middle, but she also has a great hook, right? That's kind of her weapon of choice. I'm going to take her by, let's go third round TKO. Yeah.
Yeah, there is something that does feel a bit, you know, like, oh, maybe the storm, the clouds are kind of aligning for all this. I don't know. What do you think?
Man, it's so weird because you do have Amanda. Obviously, she got the rematch win. She was looking forward to the trilogy. Said she was going to retire but didn't want Pena to have the belt and said anybody could have it but her. Yeah. Which is a little bit concerning because it makes this feel like a passing of the torch fight. This makes this feel like, oh, this is the but her situation. Not that she's going to give the fight up, but she knows this is a tough fight, and if you want to lose, you probably want to lose it to her. And with Aldana coming off back-to-back KO wins after losing to Holly Holm, she's one of the few girls that have a similar height and reach to Amanda. But Aldana hasn't fought a lot of girls who have the same height and reach as her. She's usually used to punching down and having that length and being able to use it. Yeah. I think that Holly Holm gave a super good blueprint on how to deal with that left hook, which to me could arguably be the best left hook in the MMA outside of Alex Bejeda. Like she just swings that.
It's crazy.
And what Holly did in their fight, she stayed southpaw. She was on her bike backwards the whole time, was always pawing at that, never let her get that left hook off. Yeah. But Amanda's not that fighter. Right. Amanda's a brawler. She loves getting in danger. She wants to get hit because it like wakes her up.
Which makes me nervous.
So nervous. Yeah. Because if she eats one of those left hooks, she's going out. I don't think that you can survive that. Yeah. And also for Aldana, she's very willing on the ground. She has a great guard. She's been working with Garasso's jiu-jitsu coach, who basically said like she's gonna have some stuff for Amanda.
Diego Lopes.
Yeah, Diego Lopes.
Remember
with the bangs?
What was your?
He couldn't see the odds because over his bangs.
Oh, I love it. You'd have to listen to the pod.
Yeah, but I think Amanda loves these firefights, and I think she can put a lot of pressure on Aldana, but if Aldana lands that left hand, I don't know that Amanda can deal with it. And after seeing Amanda lose and Valentina lose and seeing this run like Alexa Grasso, obviously with Yair and the way that and Brandon Moreno, the way that they're kind of building this seems like an era build, right? Where it's a whole different area that's about to come up and be a lot of champions. But it's so hard to pick against Amanda because at her best, she is the greatest. Yeah. So it's going to be a matter of somebody taking the torch with Aldana or if Amanda can maintain her greatness. And I don't think that her southpaw thing is going to surprise Aldana because she's already done it.
Yeah,
right.
Probably not
but
now.
She would be smart to keep it because, like I said, with Holly Holm, keeping that hand out there to block that left hook is how she was able to negate that. And she never let Aldana get any of her stuff off. But like I said, Amanda just doesn't fight like that.
Sure.
And I think you're going to see her sit down on punches. And Aldana does a really good job of keeping that high guard and counter punching.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna roll with Aldana as well, man. I think that Amanda could be. I think she's having a second baby. She's talking about I was ready to retire, but I changed my mind. Like I just feel like this is a passing of the torch, man. So I'm gonna take Aldana, and I'm gonna say by third round knockout.
I had third round TKO.
Oh yeah, third round TKO, second round knockout.
I did think it was interesting. I don't know if you guys caught it, but I want to say it may have, I don't know, dude, you just consume so much in a week. I don't even remember if it was like the embedded or what pre-fight presser, but Aldana kind of said that like she's been preparing for Amanda like long before this fight. I think that's smart. Like I think we've kind of talked about that before. Is like obviously you have to prepare for the person in front of you, but also like if you can't beat the best, right? Like so, and
she's been the best for so long, right? So
I know, and there is this infectious belief that Aldana has, you know, leading into this, very similar to what we saw with Pena, where you know we said the only people in that arena that night that Pena won that thought she was going to beat Nunes was Pena.
Right.
You could say her corner, but I bet if you privately asked, you know, they might even have been like, I mean, we're going to give it a go.
It could be a good fight.
And I really do think there is something to the Mexico thing, as John mentioned there. I think there's something that she could feed that energy off of. I kind of got bored last night and just kind of went through, and I'm like, I wonder if there's ever been, other than the U.S., because obviously, yes, if there's ever been more than 3 champions from one nation at a time. There was in Brazil. I want to say it was back in like, I want to say it was like Dos Santos, Anderson, like Shogun or Machida. Could have been, it was like Dos Santos, Anderson, Shogun, Machida, and then like Aldo and Barao.
Yeah.
So, you know, Mexico, this for the Mexican fighters, this could be huge. I mean, you talk about Mexico, like, you know, obviously it's been pretty well documented. They've been trying to build that, right? And now they're on the verge of having potentially 4 champions at once, which would just be crazy to be. And then you'd put them in the same category as like the U.S. and Brazil in terms of mixed martial arts. And that's just like,
because at one point,
it's crazy.
They're only, you know, the big fight was Kane, and he wasn't even born there, but he was like, kind of like the, you know, maybe we do something down there with him. Yeah. And obviously you had the Fabricio fight, but
you just think of like Russia, like, you know, Dagestan now, you know, Canada even, like, you know, all these countries that have been like just steeped in like mixed martial arts culture from the beginning, and like Mexico could be the next. I mean, the fact they have 3 is crazy, because I don't even know if any of those other countries I mentioned have had even 3. So they're already kind of in that. But you put them in the talks with Brazil and the U.S. I mean, that'd just be wild. So I do think there could be something to that. But I also think that energy that she could feed off could also turn into pressure and possibly have a negative effect as well. And at the bottom line, boys, I still think the Lioness runs these planes. I think there's no way, you know, you guys are talking about, you know, this, that, maybe he's passing the torch, as John said, or, you know, is she motivated? I think there's no way she's any less than her best coming into this. You know, she knew after that Pena loss that I think she kind of lost focus. Maybe she didn't train as hard, you know. And I think that loss showed her that. And I think she knows that any less than her best just isn't enough anymore, right? So I do think she's going to be 100% prepared. She knows the mistakes that she made. We don't know. You know, she knows she had to live with it, right? And I just think she knows that she'd be doomed to repeat him, especially against somebody like Aldana. Amanda has nothing left to prove. She could have walked away easily. So the fact that she is taking this fight, to me, is the opposite. It tells me that she still loves this game. And there's a good chance that this fight or her next could be her last, right? So there's no way I don't think that she would play around and risk ending her career on a loss. Like, Amanda's not here to pass a torch. Like, I just, bottom line, and I'm not even going at you with that, because I've kind of seen that, you know, narrative out there of like, you know, she's trying to, you know, do that. And
I don't think she's trying to give it to her. I just think this is the perfect setup, because we had that with Ronda and Holly Holm, where it was like, I ran this and now you just beat me. So, and then obviously it went to Amanda after that. But there's these situations, and I mean, who knows what happens with Valentina and Grasso. If Valentina never bounces back from that, it's a similar situation.
And with all that, I will say, even at Amanda's best, Aldana could still win this fight. devastating power, like we talked about, and not even, no woman in this division carries that amount of power. I think she is by far the hardest hitter. As John said, the left hook might be the best other than Alex Pineda. I love that. That's hilarious. So there is a chance that she could overwhelm her on the feet like we did see with Pena. And if Aldana does win, I think she is beating a fully prepared, a fully ready to go Amanda Nunes. And I think Nunes is motivated, so it'll be extremely impressive. That's the other thing of it is if Aldana pulls this off, I also don't want the narrative to be like, oh, well, Amanda's got kids coming and this and that. Like, no, I think Amanda's here to win, man.
Right.
Like, she knows, she wants this. But where I think Amanda wins this will be in the grappling. I think everybody kind of knows that's where Amanda holds the biggest advantage in this fight, and in most fights for that matter. And I think that gap, I fear, is probably so big that I don't know if Aldana could have closed it as much.
She has a really good guard, man. And she has some good submission wins, too.
But her last fight with Pena, too, I feel like there was moments in that fight where Nunes, like, she got caught in that nasty armbar and almost, like, that was a terrible, terrible spot to be in, and she constantly went back into Pena's guard and was not looking ultra impressive on top from there. So that for me was just kind of like I don't know.
I really think that I could see her getting her on the cage, body lock.
She has fell in love with the subs more recently than just staying and brawling.
It does make me nervous because, like John said, and I totally agree with that sentiment, is she is one of those ones that wants to come out and just like start banging, and you're like, oh no. But I think if she's coming in to win this fight, I just think she doesn't play around.
She loves to load up those big shots. She actually set up and load up big knockouts. But Aldana's a really good counter striker too, man. I'm so excited for this fight, and I mean, not that I wasn't for the Pena, but I didn't know how much different that was going to go because now you've seen it.
Sure.
But, this could be... And then another thing real quick I like about Aldana is when she goes into, like, her combos, it doesn't feel like some of these other female fighters that we've seen where it seems a little predetermined or whatever. She's going to the body, hook, bop, bop. She's mixing it up so much. And, we've seen from Alexa Grasso, if working with her coach, that means that rear naked choke must be able to take pigment out your face.
And Lobo, she comes from a great gym. And like I said, she's going to be ready to go, Aldana. Like, I'm not doubting that, but I just think Amanda's wrestling is just so, it's just better. And I just don't know if there's enough. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, we'll see.
Yeah, we will. And
your boy Dorman said, I wasn't too impressed before the up kick on Chason. Nunes is leagues above.
I agree. And that's what I think. I mean, I guess, you talk about the guard. The up kick was interesting there on Chason. But again, like...
That should be a form of torture. Like just getting kicked in the ribs like that with the back of the heel.
So I do like Amanda here. I like her by third round submission. Could be a little risky early, but I just don't think she's here to play, man. I think she's here, and I think she's just going to try to make a statement. And I think, too, like, you remember, like, again, we talked about this last week with DC talking about John Jones, and he's like, my biggest fear is that John just didn't feel threatened at heavyweight, and that's why we're kind of seeing him not really rushing to come back, right? I feel like, Amanda felt the pressure. She felt the loss. And then I don't know that she was all the way motivated for that third Nunes fight. She kind of said as much, too. Like, it just doesn't really excite me. I think she knows the danger here, right? And I do think this Aldana fight, it's kind of gave her that, like...
And that's where I talk about the brawling thing that gets interesting, because she loves these challenges of trying to do stuff, and she gets in this pocket where she's just smiling and loading up a punch and, like, taking one and still smiling. Yeah. It's like, I just don't...
I do. I'm telling you, man. I could see her. If she falls into that game, it could be a rough...
Because Aldana, those hands are going to be on her forehead or on her temples the whole fight. She doesn't break that high guard. She doesn't make a lot of mistakes, like overreaching. But Amanda's really good at setting traps as well. So I think this is probably one of the more exciting fights for Amanda, for me, as far as like leading up to thinking about how the fight could go since Cyborg.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. This is a fun fight. Like I said, again, I understand people saying, Oliveira Dariush. I get it. Totally get it. Like I said, there's not many fights bigger than that.
We're talking about the greatest female fighter ever.
Right, absolutely.
Like you can't take anything away from that.
Dude, I absolutely 100% agree. Well, that's all we got for tonight's show. Again, just want to thank everybody for coming in tonight. Please check out our weekly podcast, the Mixed Martial Arts. I almost said the Mixed Martial Arts Underground, the Neon Belly Podcast. Give us a follow on all socials at Neon Belly Podcast. Also, make sure you are subscribed right here on the MMA Underground YouTube. Make sure to give them a follow on all socials as well at the UG Boys. Anything before we go? Brandon.
Hey, just because you see some people that aren't super, super big on this card, keep watching. Because I'm telling you, these are guys like Nate talks about a lot on the pod. Sometimes you don't know guys, like whether it's a fight night or something like that. Can be the guys that we're talking about 10 years down the road who have crazy legacies. And even if it's, you're just kind of a UFC fan or just a Conor fan, when you're watching two guys in the cage fight, it's the same language. It's always fun. It's always exciting. Give it a watch.
And that's what I said. Tomorrow night, if you're a fan of the sport, when these guys and girls get locked in there, that crowd's going to be going nuts. They're going to be going, Marc-Andre Barrio and Eric, they're going to be going crazy for Marc-Andre. They're going to be going crazy for Mike Malott. The crowd's going to be energized.
Nate Landwehr, bro.
Come on, man.
He's liable. He likes to turn heel, so he's liable to go in on Vancouver.
Nate Landwehr is probably more Canadian than most Canadians. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, Clarksville, Tennessee, stand up, man. Let's go.
Yeah,
I'm
just
ready.
Like I said earlier when we talked about it, Neon Belly Pod on Twitter. If you guys want to get on there, we're going to be live tweeting during the fight, so you can kind of see what we have to think and give us your opinions on there. We usually try to keep that going pretty well, so would love to see you guys on there as well.
Any last minute things from chat before we get out?
Nope.
Alrighty, that's what we got. We will be back in exactly 4 weeks for the next episode of The Kickback, Friday, July 7th for UFC 290, boys. Alexander Volkanovski versus Rodriguez, Brandon Moreno versus Alexandre Pantoja, and Robert Whitaker versus Dricus Du Plessis. My dojo, my truck. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
Until then, check out the podcast, Neon Belly. Stay locked here on the MMA Underground. We'll see you guys then. Peace.